Welcome in. It's football and other F words. The gang is all here. Just a scheduling announcement. Next week, there will be no episode. I will be out of town. Mike will be out of town. So no episode next week. So we're going to take the week off and we'll be back the following week. And of course, it's, the summer. I don't think we'll miss too much, even though that Brian Callahan is making the pass rounds or press rounds and giving us a lot more information in just like 1 week than we got from Mike Vrabel in like 5 years of coaching this team. It's been pretty awesome from a content standpoint, but also from, I'm assuming, from a fan standpoint for everybody, that this is some great information that we're all getting, and hopefully and we're going to break it all down. There's a lot of stuff that I've clipped off, not clipped up, but put in my notes that I thought was really interesting. Then we'll, of course, talk about OTAs, who wasn't there, big deal, no deal. Really not a big deal for any of them. But stuff that we'll talk about and dive deep into. And of course, this episode is brought to you by Dylan Radins, who's the king of all things and the god, and he's omnipotent. So this morning it was announced that San Francisco game, his stats have been completely erased. He's so powerful. He's gone back in time, erased all of the stats from his San Francisco game. And he was not only the left tackle for that game, but now the quarterback, the running back, and a cornerback as well. So he could do it all. He is God. All praise Dylan Radins, the god of lightning and thunder and Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, you might have thought that was A.J. Brown making all those catches in that game down the stretch. That was actually Dylan Radins wearing number 11. It's crazy. What a performance. Yeah. Just a one-man band kind of showing. For
one-man band. But anyway, we are actually brought to you by Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Been around for over 50 years. Get all your booze, get all your party supplies over at Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. All right. A lot to get to, a lot that I missed. When you guys recorded on Wednesday, the schedule had not been released yet. The schedule is released. Just general thoughts if you have them. I know that Mike's in love with the sequel to last year's Titans video. It was atrocious and a affront to creativity. It's an affront to creativity. It was probably the worst sequel I have seen since, gosh, what would be the last worst sequel? No, Blade 2 was better than the original. Let's see. It was awful. It was awful. We're not off. This is the funny thing again.
God.
Okay, here we go. First off, I'm not going to get derailed. Let's stick with how awful that thing was. It was staged. Okay, you're going to tell me the guy that was wearing the Amy Adams Strunk thing shirt with her face all over it did not know who the Jags were? Okay.
I will say.
Not do it again. I know you want it every year, Mike, because that's what your tweet said. But you're an idiot, so hopefully you'll be wrong.
I will say they clearly staged some of those answers, and I wish they would go more raw on that. But I get some of the bits that they were doing, and I thought they were kind of funny. So I kind of like some of the recurring stuff.
Maybe that guy didn't know who Amy Adams Strunk was.
Well, then why is he wearing the shirt? How do you?
It's like,
first off, how do you even find that? Where do you find that shirt? Where's that shirt? That seems
I've never even seen that shirt before.
That's a custom-made shirt.
Yeah.
But Stoney, general thoughts on the schedule?
I don't care. I generally do not care about the schedule release. I think it's so. I'll be honest with you. My reaction to last year's video, the first time they pulled this trick, I was just enamored by it. Well done. Tip of the cap. This year, I confess, I watched it and was just kind of like, I don't blame them for running it back and trying to put a different kind of spin on it, but it just didn't really do it for me. I didn't have the same reaction as last year. As for the schedule itself, I can't really get too into the weeds on it right now because you just never know how these teams are going to turn out. We're talking about it right now as if the New England Patriots and the Washington Commanders are going to be automatic wins for this team, but you never know with injuries, scheme changes, coaching changes, personnel changes. It's possible. You look at the Houston Texans a year ago, it's possible for a team to turn things around pretty quickly and go on a run. So think all manner of exercise in predicting and analyzing the schedule. I hope Easton's not watching today. I hope Easton has his ears covered for this, but I just think it's a pointless exercise. I look at the schedule and then I move on with my life.
Mike, what are your general thoughts on the schedule? Are you a schedule nerd, or are you a schedule apathetic schedule person?
I truly do not give a shit from the standpoint of like trying to look at it and say, oh, wow, this is going to be the hard part of the schedule, or this is like, because we all thought like, I think all last year we talked about like how hard the start of the schedule was and how easy it was going to be over the back half. Well, nobody knew that the Texans were going to be good, when we looked at it, and the Texans were good last year. So it's like, you don't know who's going to be good. I think, if you look at Vegas win totals and stuff like that, that's a better way to do it, but it's still, it's all fugazi bullshit, right? Like it just doesn't matter.
Had the Texans way low on the list,
right?
I mean,
yeah, they were
Vegas.
like,
It's an imperfect. Looking at the schedule and trying to predict the wins is a very imperfect science, even for much vaunted Warren Sharp win total and all that kind of stuff, which I like. But that's probably the best way to do it. But it's still majorly flawed.
And you don't know which quarterback's going to be injured when you play them, or which wide receiver is going to be nursing an ankle or whatever. Like there's just so many variables that go into like how good that actually team is that week. It's a week-to-week league. We all know it. So I don't put a lot of stock into it. The things I like to look at are the rest differentials and how the schedule generally lays out, primetime games, stuff like that. I think it's kind of interesting that 15 out of 18 weeks this fall, I know exactly where I'm going to be at 12 o'clock on Sunday. So it's really kind of a consistent schedule, which, I think Brian Callahan will love, because coaches love routine and not having to change anything week to week. And he literally won't have to change anything with his schedule except for 2 weeks all year. They've got 1 3:00 afternoon game against the Chargers, and then the Monday nighter in Miami, and that is it. Everything else will be the church lunch Titans, the rest of the season. So,
well, I got two things I want to bring up to you because I thought they were interesting discussions. I don't know if you guys listened to a football show on Thursday when PK filled in for me, but he talked about how it was a bad thing that the Jets were so early, or not necessarily a bad thing, but a disadvantage because the Jets are so early, because that will be the healthiest Aaron Rodgers has been. But I think that it is a good thing because that will be the rustiest he's been, and there will be some rust, some time to gel that they will need. I think it's more reminiscent of the Browns week 2 game last year, where I think I'm definitely afraid of the Jets defense more than I'm afraid of the quarterback. And I feel like if you would have got Aaron Rodgers in week 14, he's probably hitting his groove week 8, probably really week 4.
But Tyron Smith is dead by then, So
yeah, but then you have Olu Fashanu. You have Olu Fashanu right behind him.
True. I forgot they got him.
Yeah. So and then you got Malachi Corley. Like everything is kind of like a little bit better, I feel like, later on down the road for the Jets. So where do you guys land on that particular part of that part of the schedule?
I thought Braden had a pretty good counterpoint to that, in that it is Aaron Rodgers. And so at this stage in his career, does he really need a lot of time to kind of get back into a groove? I kind of hark back to what I said before. Like we don't know. I mean, he might not make it to week 2. And even if he is fully healthy, like how confident are we, even at peak performance, that we're talking about like prime Aaron Rodgers here? Like I don't know if I'm kind of out of the, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I kind of feel like even peak Aaron Rodgers right now doesn't really scare me as much as what you alluded to, Zach, which is the Jets defense and the matchup problems that they present for an offense that is trying to get its legs beneath them. I'm kind of with you. I would rather give this Titans offense time to gel before going up against that defense than getting them in week 2 right now. So I'm kind of looking at this matchup with the Jets from that standpoint, instead of like, I almost just take Aaron Rodgers entirely out of the equation altogether for me.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty valid point. And again, like, yeah, Rodgers could tweak the Achilles or mess up his ankle or something during training camp or something like that. Like we don't know what's going to happen here, but I mean, he's he's been around that group. They added Mike Williams. I think
Malachi Corley.
Yeah, Malachi Corley. So they've done some stuff as far as like revamping the offense around him. But for the most part, I mean, it's Garrett Wilson. It's the Alan Lazard. It's still some familiar faces for him. So I don't think it's going to take him a ton of time to get going. Now, I will say, I think it's good to catch Mike Williams early, coming off of the ACL. Because he's probably going to struggle early in the season. We see every single year, with Titans players and with non-Titans players, guys coming back from ACL suck early. So I think catching Mike Williams early might be the best benefit out of all of it, honestly.
We also still can't rule out the possibility that Rodgers retires and runs for vice president.
Oh God, I would love it. I would love it.
What do you all think about the rookies? Because they face 4 rookie quarterbacks, and I felt like they didn't really emphasize it on that episode, but it's like we've talked about it before. The 6 first-round rookies, right? Typically, even in a 3-man class, only one comes out to be at least average to above average or even elite. And now you got 6, and you're facing 4 of them. And the likelihood of the ones that you're facing are Caleb, JJ, Jaden, and Drake. They are probably one of those guys is going to be the hit. I wouldn't put my money on Bo Nix, but it's possible that Bo Nix is the guy that is the best. But to me, I feel like you're facing, no matter when you're facing the rookies, whether at the beginning of the season or the end of the season, that is a distinct advantage for at least 75% of these games that you're facing with the rookies. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be pretty consistent with an idea that I've had the entirety of this offseason. And it's not just that they're facing rookie quarterbacks, but these rookie quarterbacks in particular. I'm not as high on this quarterback class as a lot of the draft media was. I still think Jaden Daniels, even Drake May, and JJ McCarthy are all 3 developmental guys that are going to take some time to get their feet beneath them in the NFL. I was really high on last year's class with Richardson, Young, and Stroud. So if you're asking me last year this question, I'm probably a little more fearful, but I think these are advantageous matchups for the Titans. And the one guy out of the bunch that I feel like has the best chance of being a superstar in this league, you catch him in his very first game. So I'm kind of cool with the matchup. I think these do favor the Titans.
Yeah, the one thing that I worry about with the Caleb Williams matchup right out of the gate, week 1, is one, you have no idea what that offense is going to end up looking like, which, to be fair, neither the Bears don't know what the Titans offense is going to look like either, really. But I think the hype factor is going to be off the charts in Chicago, and that doesn't always mean anything. Like the Browns had that week 1 when the Titans went up there and dusted them a few years ago with Baker coming off that big year and everything. But I think that is going to be a spectacle in Chicago. I think the Bears fans are going to be rabid for that first week. And if things go well for the Bears early, that could turn into a very, very strong home atmosphere for Chicago. So that's the one thing that worries me about catching them in that home opener week 1. The other guys, they all catch in that kind of middle block of the schedule that November month is going to be rookie quarterback month for Denard Wilson and the Titans defense, which it'll be interesting to see how those guys fare. But I think all those other guys are going to struggle a little bit. I am like you, Stoney, a little bit more.
If Jaden even makes it to the game, I mean, him and Lamar Jackson are got to be 2 of the skinniest. It's like the weight they lost the weight that Jaden Daniels really never had, but the weight that Lamar Jackson lost found its way to Patrick Mahomes, apparently. I don't know if you saw Patrick Mahomes' fat-ass slob picture of walking in.
Hey, I'm just excited that I have the same physique as the baddest man in the NFL now. So I'm just going to go with that.
I want to ask you about that Bears game because I do find it interesting that they opened up as 4.5 favorites versus the Titans, 4.5 points favorites. I don't really, I guess I shouldn't say I find it surprising, but I do find it interesting because everybody else finds it surprising. The Bears have the same head coach. They have a rookie quarterback. I get it, but they have also added tons and tons of pieces around them. They're a much better team than what they were last year, and the defense will probably be better or be good as it was last year. So are you guys really surprised? Because I found that fans and media were like, hammer the 4.5 for the Titans, and I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Go
go ahead,
son.
Mike. Sorry.
I would say
You go,
that
Mike.
my initial inclination is, you say 2.5 or 3 points for home field advantage. The Bears being 1 or 2 points better than the Titans by Vegas standards is not that surprising, in my opinion. The Bears down the stretch last year were tremendous on defense. They were one of the best defenses in the NFL after the Montez Sweat trade. And obviously Jalen Johnson emerged. They've got some talented pieces, and then they've added to that over the offseason, obviously. But that defense was really good down the stretch last year, and there's reason to believe that will continue into 2024. And then you throw Caleb Williams, and look, I know Caleb Williams has detractors out there. There's some people that think he may struggle right away, but I just don't see any scenario where he's not better than Justin Fields pretty much right away. Throw in the fact that they added Keenan Allen, throw in the fact that they added Roma Dunze. Like, this is a very upgraded Bears team, and you've got good tackles too now. They've got Darnell Wright on the right side coming into year 2 after a pretty good rookie showing. And then their left tackle, Braxton Jones, is kind of solidified that spot too. So I think they're a pretty good football team. Their over-unders are at 9.5 or something like that, I think is what I saw last week. So not surprised that they're relatively heavy favorites over the Titans in week 1 at home. I think that's pretty fair.
And listen, it's not saying that the Tennessee Titans are going to win or lose, but just looking at it from an objective Vegas perspective, I know that, Stoney, you're kind of high on the Bears, and if I'm not mistaken, and I'm looking at it, and I agree, you're looking at DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen as your top 3 wide receivers. You have Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett as your tight ends, and both those are pass-catching tight ends that could be on the field even on run-blocking situations, and they went and got DeAndre Swift, and they have a really good offensive line. So, Stoney, I mean, I guess you could either play devil's advocate or just agree with the rest of us, but, I mean, where are you at on the 4.5 favorite?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting line because I think I think a lot is going to hinge upon whether or not Caleb Williams is comfortable week 1. Like I said, I feel like he's the guy of this bunch that you want to catch early in his career because he could still be trying to work out a lot of the chemistry stuff. But man, if these guys gel, this is a team that is loaded. Like Mike said, the defense for me is the thing that people forget about when they start talking about Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze. And if you're a Stacking the Inbox subscriber, I thought Roma Dunze was the best player in the entire draft. So you get the firepower on offense, but don't sleep on how good this defense is. And I think that's what's going to make it particularly challenging for a Titans team that is installing a new offense, a lot of new faces that has to gel in its own right. So I kind of felt like this was going to be one of those numbers that hovered around a field goal, but to go 4.5, I could see this being a number where Vegas thinks that the casual bettors are going to look at the offensive firepower. They're going to look at the defensive matchup. They're going to look at all the unknowns, the unproven commodities that the Titans are going into the season with. And they're thinking that the bettors are going to just hammer the Bears in that spot, only for the Titans to come out and hang around within 3 or 4 points because they're being undervalued in their own right. So I think this could be, I would be surprised to see Chicago cover that number. As things stand right now, of course, we haven't seen a down of training camp football yet, but I also think it's a game that the Bears could win pretty decidedly too if things click for them early.
It is the Kevin Byard revenge game as well. So you got
we can't forget that
hidden factor. You can't forget the Kevin Byard revenge game. But I really like the Bears. I don't know if I like them at 9.5 overall, but I was not overly shocked, upset, or clutching my pearls that it opened up at 4.5. I just kind of saw it, moved on with my day, and watched everybody else cry and piss and moan about it.
And let's also just say, look, Titans fans, you guys have got to stop getting upset over all these people, all these lines and all these predictions and everything. Like, everyone's going to think you're going to suck this year. That's just the narrative that's out there about this team, you can disagree with it. That's fine. I disagree that they're going to be as bad as what some people think they're going to be. But the reason that people think that they're going to be bad is that they were bad last year. And then they're starting a quarterback that a lot of people just don't believe in, right or wrong, right? Like, people don't like Will Levis nationally like that. Some people, like, there's exceptions to that rule, but generally the consensus is that, you know, people are down on him as a quarterback prospect. So that can be totally unfair, but like, let's just not make this a summer of grievance as a fan base. Like, just let it go. Like, embrace the underdog role. You're going to be an underdog in basically every game.
To it, right? Can we all just be used to it? Like, I mean, at this point, we're going on summer five, the fifth summer in a row where the Titans are undervalued or underappreciated and all that kind of stuff.
Here, I gotta answer this one for Timmy Sama in the chat.
Yeah.
Two position groups that the Bears are clearly better than the Titans. Offensive line, 100%. I'll say wide receiver, 100%. And let's see, where else? Edge for sure, without question. Inside linebacker, without question. How many do we need to go to? We're at 4. Look, they're better at a lot of spots.
You could possibly throw quarterback in there by the end of the year. I mean, I'm not ready.
Yeah, most people would. Most people would say quarterback right now. I'm not willing to like.
People say quarterback. I'm not ready to say it, but I think if you ask the truth, but I mean, they are better. I mean, when you talk about DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen, that is a better group than what the Tennessee Titans have, and the 100%. Tennessee Titans have a really great group comparatively to the rest of the NFL and to what they've had, obviously. But that is a better group. DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's
we named the wide receivers. You could say tight end.
Yeah, tight end. They're definitely better at tight end too. So we
got wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, edge, inside linebacker. That's 5.
Probably safety too right now. I mean, I'm not the biggest Byard guy, but I'm not the biggest hooker guy either.
I really don't know anything about Jaquan Brisker. That's their starting safety opposite Kevin Byard, so I don't think I would.
It's okay.
I would do that.
I mean, we could say the same about Elijah Molden, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that's true. Most people probably do not know who. Well, I don't know. He was at least known through the draft process, so maybe there's some lingering national people who remember Elijah.
Yeah, probably. I like Elijah. I just don't like him as a starter. He's a good role player.
Yeah, Stoney's making faces, but
yeah.
Oh, here we go. Hold on, he's back up.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys
didn't hear anything you said, Stoney.
Could hear any of that or not. I think the Titans definitely have the Bears at left guard. I'll take Peter Skoronski over Tevin Jenkins.
They have him at left guard. They have him at corner easily. Yeah.
Yeah. But either way, that's how the Bears stack up and all that kind of stuff. We actually had a lot of scheduled talk. Speaking of talk, Brian Callahan has been talking to the press, just letting out all the state secrets that Mike. I bet Mike Vrabel is like, these dudes aren't going to win a game. They are going to be 0-17. They've told too much to the media. That they should all get fired. It's not Fort Knox anymore, but there's a lot of stuff in there that I thought was interesting. I know, I mean, hell, I said it the other day, but talking about hearing that Brian's dad is like nearing 70 years old and is the most analytically forward-thinking coach in the entire building is hilarious to me, because we just came off of having a 40-year-old coach who hated the idea. He wouldn't know what EPA was. He'd think it was the Environmental Protection Agency, or he'd just have a brain aneurysm. I don't know. He may just have a brain aneurysm right there on the spot if you overloaded him with too much analytics talk. But to me, that was one of my favorite takeaways, was the fact that, 70 years old or 67 years old, but knows he's like EPA obsessed, which is a good thing for a team that has not been that. Mike, I know you big into analytics and all that kind of stuff as well. When you heard that, was like your first reaction?
Tingling in my loins. But no, I think it's exciting. I think Callahan, and look, I mean, EPA is like not super advanced. Like, that's pretty commonly used among like the football analytics community. That's not like they invented a new, metric or anything like that. I'm sure that's what Chad Brinker's working on with Sarah Bailey and that staff and everything. But no, I think it's encouraging that they embrace that kind of thing. It's the way that the football is going. And I know Mike Vrabel, to some degree, he would embrace analytics as far as like, I did think he got better about like his fourth down decision making and steering into like what is now more commonly accepted as what the practice that gives you the best chance to win football games. The 2-point conversion attempt in Miami down when they were down 15 going for down 14 going for 2 so that they'd have a chance to win the game with an extra point after the second touchdown. Like those things, he made real progress in that environment, but there's so much more to it than just those things. And I think that's where the Vrabel in the old regime had kind of fallen down, was that I think they stopped there. They weren't going to the next levels of what these analytic tools can do from like a modeling standpoint and an understanding deeper into what you're seeing on tape. Like it's not replacing tape. It's giving you deeper understanding of what you're seeing and not relying on just your gut feel from watching hours and hours of tape. You can actually know, hey, this guy's moving, at this rate, or this guy's exerting this much power, or this guy, just he's able to close the gap on the receiver quicker than this other guy or whatever. Like all these other things that can be measured and modeled now with modern technology that other teams are taking advantage of. I think they're steering into that. Bill Callahan has blocking sleds he's invented and is measuring all this other stuff with the offensive linemen. I think they're moving in a good, positive direction. It's very exciting to me. And I'm glad it's being led by a 70-year-old man.
Stoney, your thoughts on the whole analytics thing versus Vrabel versus now and the usage and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, it seemed like a pretty revelatory interview with Brian Callahan on Bussin' with the Boys and The Athletic Show, both of them, and to hear that Bill Callahan is so in the weeds on this stuff is definitely encouraging, because your position group coaches are the ones that are actually going to be the most hands-on with the players. So if you can trust that those philosophies, the principles that you're learning, that you're picking up on through analytics are trickling down to that granular of a level, I think it's a really good thing for the organization. And I would echo a lot of what Mike said. The only thing with the Vrabel era is that I don't know about you guys, if you guys have access to info that I don't, but I'm thinking like we don't really even know how much him or his staff really used analytics, because they never fucking talked about it. It was just a closed book in these press conferences. So it's hard to kind of glean what the difference is outside of just picking up nuggets from player press conferences and assistant coach press conference or media availabilities, when you just kind of hear guys that like, they don't mean to take a dig at Vrabel or anything, but they just drop some nugget about how things are different than they were a year ago. We can glean from that, but it's hard to compare because we just knew so little from the Vrabel regime.
Well, I mean, John Robinson himself said, "I am the analytics department," and
yes,
that was a big problem. And then I will say this about Mike Vrabel, is that I don't remember what the stat particularly was, but remember he was asked at some point during Will Levis's run, his EPA or his completion percentage goes up so many points on these types of plays. Have you thought about using these types of plays? And he just had this weird word vomit where he doesn't really know what he's even talking about. Like in this particular realm of information, not to say that Mike Vrabel's dumb. I just like it. John Robinson was an analytics caveman. Mike Vrabel was the Amish. Like he has a little bit, he knows about technology. He has a little bit of it to be a little bit dangerous and maybe scare off some Mennonites and stuff. And I may have the Amish and Mennonites confused. But as far as I know, like it just never seemed to get there. And it just, from stuff that I know that he would get handed something, and if something was handed to the coaching staff from the analytics department, I don't think it was taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it sounded like a lot of what they were doing was like the position coach or the scouts, remember, like they had the quote about the scouts were kind of doing analytics on the side, like and it's like, that's not really, like, that's not what the Eagles are doing. That's not what the Ravens are doing. Like, yes, running third down, like tendency data, like, yes, that is a part of analytics, but that is like your entry level. It has like, this deep in the iceberg of what analytics really can do. And so I'm just glad that they're going deeper than that now. But I think we know that they weren't like seriously trying to attack that advantage in the previous regime.
I always kind of felt like those
advantage.
press conferences were just Mike Vrabel filibustering, by the way, like not saying anything completely on purpose, just trying to drown out the minutes so that he could leave the podium.
Oh, 100%. Hated that.
Yeah, more than likely. And stay on topic with Bill Callahan and Brian Callahan here. The idea that he's designing the run game, not overly surprising, but he is in charge of the entire run game. But also on the blocking side, on the pass blocking side, I thought it was interesting about how he coaches, how he takes if you have 50 reps in practice as an individual, you are going to see those 50 reps later that day. Like, you are studying every rep with Bill Callahan. But what are your thoughts on, because there's a couple different ways we can go down this path. So, Mike, I guess I'll ask you, because you tweeted about it last night. You talked about how there's and this was the one good point from Stillman this month. So we have another 30 days till he sees a shadow. But where are you? This equipment, all the equipment they're using bungee cords and all this kind of stuff. But obviously the sled. But it does seem like there's a lot more equipment. This is something that I think Braden also said last week from his first visit to the practice. But it just seems like it's we're talking about forward thinking, right? We're talking about analytics, but now it seems like there's a forward thinking among the props or equipment used in these practices. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I have not been to a Callahan practice yet, so I can only speak to what I've seen on the videos. But and also what they've talked about and everything like that with the blocking sleds that he developed and everything, and other players that have either been with Callahan before or know about the sleds have chimed in at various places. So, but I can tell you, Keith Carter, these were not the same drills that Keith Carter was running. It's very different. I feel like Keith Carter spent 90% of his time working zone blocking combination drills where it was a guard tackle combo, working, a little double team climb action against two other offensive linemen holding pads and giving token resistance. It was a lot of that they spent time doing versus working sleds, working technique, working pass block sets, like those things. And I do think you get back what you invest your time in, right? And I think they were a good run blocking team. They were a good zone blocking team during Keith Carter's time here. And I think people sometimes unfairly lump it in as the offensive line was bad, period, underline, and not, well, the offensive line was bad at pass blocking, which it was, but it was pretty good at run blocking. Even the year, Dennis Daly was at left tackle. Dennis Daly was a pretty good run blocker. He could not pass block to save his life, but he could move some bodies and did some good things in the run game, which is why he stuck in the lineup so long. Now, should they have been prioritizing run blocking over pass protection? No, they should not have been. It's one of their biggest failures as a coaching staff, in my opinion. But I think they did get back what they invested in that, but I'm excited that Bill Callahan is investing in other things besides zone blocking combinations, right? Like I think we're going to see returns from that too.
And Stoney, I'm going to change the subject slightly here but we're still talking about Bill Callahan. But the offensive line run blocking has had its fair share of critiques in the last 2 years. A lot of people think that they should shoulder the full blame of their woes, but I do think that the run blocking obviously did get worse over these last 2 years. But looking at now that we know that Bill Callahan is basically run game coordinator, he's handling the run fits and all this stuff. And I'm sure there will be some input from Brian on top of that, but he seems to be the top dog, which to me is smart. You utilize the people that are fucking good and you have one of the best. So when I talked about that, your eyes kind of lit up. So, as like a kid at Christmas. So how excited are you with the additions of Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard, this offensive line in general with J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, and Bill Callahan? Like, how excited are we? Kind of forgetting and downplaying maybe that this run game could end up being one of the league's top run games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an idea that is being slept on this offseason because and rightfully so, Titans fans are excited for a more quote unquote modern offense. You had reports from OTAs yesterday where people that were out there were saying, I've never seen them throw the ball this much in a practice before. And now fans are, just ecstatic that they're going to get to watch this offense. But I think the bread and butter being multiple on offense and difficult to defend, you have to have a run game to complement it. And Brian Callahan and Bill Callahan have both said at different points throughout this off season and media availabilities that the run game is still important. You still want to be able to run the ball whenever you need to run the ball. That's something that I applaud from them, and both I think can be trusted to look at the personnel that they have. It's something that Brian specifically talked about in that interview with The Athletic, to take the personnel that you have and tinker your system to fit what they do well. And so I think that's encouraging because we're not going to get more of this Mike Vrabel regime saying, it's execution, right? The system is not the problem. It's player execution. And we just got to coach better. We got to play better, that sort of thing. This to me feels like it's a twofold thing. It is a coaching staff that is going to make sure that they've got players in the right position to succeed. It is also an offensive line that has recommitted to getting some big bodies and some juice in there. It's not a surprise the last couple of years that run blocking dipped off a little bit when your answer to the left tackle problem is Andre Dillard, who is built probably more closely to a tight end than he is J.C. Latham. So you add a little bit of beef up front and you mix in the zone, the gap schemes, which is reflective of what's going on in the NFL. I'm reminded of a concept on defense, which is an entirely different discussion, but with what Denard Wilson wants to do, I think it's a similar thing. NFL is not so simple as playing zone or playing man anymore. If you get into the intricacies of coverage, rushing, all that stuff, personnel groupings, you realize it's kind of a hybrid of both. It's kind of, I've got this zone until a man comes through, and then I take that man to the next zone. Like all sorts of intricacies involved. And I think that's the same thing on offense. It's going to be what makes it hard for defenses to defend our offense. And it's going to be mixing up the blocking scheme in addition to the personnel groupings, the play calling, all of that stuff. And I think that's what's so refreshing to hear from Bill Callahan, who's making a concerted effort. By the way, I know the hype train has left the station already, but I also read this about Bill Callahan and think he might be Tony Stark, just in a lab somewhere designing offensive line equipment that's going to improve technique and all this stuff. But I am so stoked because all of the signs that we've gotten so far from nuggets and press conferences, interviews, media availabilities indicate that this is a staff that knows what it wants to do, but is willing to pivot towards the things that their personnel tells them they're good at doing.
Well, we'll say this, Cleveland, but during his tenure there, they averaged 6th in rushing yards and 8th in rushing touchdowns over those last 4 years. Obviously, they rank in the top 10 and also attempts, whereas the Bengals have averaged 23rd in attempts. So it may not be maybe not one of the tops in the league, but if we start looking at yards per attempt, I think that we're talking about a team that is really doing what they need to be, and that's having an efficient run game. There's a difference between having a lot of yards and having a lot of touchdowns coupled with a lot of attempts, whereas having good yards per attempt coupled with lower rushing attempts means that you are still a pass-forward team without sacrificing the efficiency of the run game. And we got to also keep in mind that a lot of the best teams that made the playoffs are really good running teams. Just that they don't spend a lot on running backs, and that's the difference. But, I thought the run game stuff was very interesting. But what I also found interesting about Brian Callahan was his willingness to admit that, like, hey, I am a little green on in-game adjustments and in-game play calling, which, yeah, that makes sense, right? I mean, we all know that is both these guys, both Denard Wilson and Brian Callahan, are that way. This is their officially first year calling all the plays. So in saying that, though, but what I've liked that he's done is that he is studying LaFleur, McVay, and Kyle Shanahan and leaning on his experience being with the best in-game play calling pivoter, if you will, in Gary Kubiak. But he's learning and studying. He's scouting coaches, which I find so interesting and so unique. And obviously he's, scouting LaFleur. And who does the Tennessee Titans play this year? It's LaFleur and all the opponents that LaFleur, goes up against twice a year. So there's a lot of film there. Not saying that yields wins, but at least will yield. It's not going to be, we got 15 plays, right? We got 15 plays and here we go. Because I can't remember who said it, but someone's like, well, the first 15 plays, the opening game script for the Tennessee Titans has been pretty good, even under Todd Downing. I'm like, well, didn't they go with a huge drought without having a touchdown on an opening drive? To me, I think that is key, and not only what this team could be in 2024, but what this team can be beyond. And I want to get your analysis on that, Mike, from a guy who, studies the game, studies coaching tendencies, studies the analytics. What can you really learn from LaFleur, McVay, and Shanahan without talking to them? What can you see on tape? How does that work in your mind? When he said that, you pictured what?
I think it's a lot of it is play sequencing, right? I think it's setting up certain plays over the course of a game that you want to get to at a certain point, maybe in the third quarter, maybe in the fourth quarter in a big spot, where you're laying the groundwork with a few looks that are going to bait this team into giving you the desired look that you want against this big shot play down the road. So I think play sequencing, and then what Brian Callahan talked about on the Athletic Football Show, he was talking about with those play callers and everything like that. One of the things that, he said he felt like was a negative for some of the play calling across the league is that all the creative stuff, all the different stuff, all the designer type plays, basically guys just shoot their load in the first 15 plays. All those plays are coming out right out of the chute. And then once you get out of that first scripted, segment, you're going to get your bread and butter shit that's been on the tape all year that the teams, can scout and have a plan for. So defenses almost kind of relax into knowing that, hey, all right, we've got out of the danger zone of we got to be on our toes. Now we can really start to key in on tendencies. And he mentioned Shanahan as being a guy that was really good at sprinkling in those designers plays, those tendency breakers throughout a game instead of loading them all up in the front section of the play call or of the play sheet. So I think that's what I view as what he's getting at there and what he can learn. And I love that he's thinking that way already, that he's trying, he thinks the game in a way that I think is going to be very advantageous to the Titans, not only just from him calling plays, but just from the way that he's going to try to implement and build this offense. I think he thinks the game exactly the way I would want a modern NFL head coach to think it. And I'm super excited to see how he tailors this thing around Will Levis, around DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, all these big pieces that they have now. How does he tailor that to fit all their strengths? And what does this offense look like? Because we can say it's going to look like Cincinnati to some degree, and I think it will, but it's not going to be copy paste Cincinnati's offense. They're going to use elements from the Browns that his dad and Bill Callahan, who he said is going to largely handle the heavy lifting on the run game design part of things, whereas he said himself, Nick Holtz, and Bo Hardigree, the quarterbacks coach, are going to be kind of the guys working the pass game concepts and coordinating with Will Levis. So I think it's going to be super interesting to see how that all gets put together. And that's what they're working on right now. Like, they're building all that, or I guess that's what they have been working on, and now they're installing it. But I'm super excited to see like how this actually gets tailored, because I think it will be a tailored offense to what he believes Will Levis's strengths are and what Will Levis believes Will Levis's strengths are.
I think one thing.
Go ahead.
If I can add one thing that I think Shanahan does particularly well from a tendency breaker standpoint is that a lot of that 49ers offense, you can get to a lot of different things out of the same formation. So it looks like one thing, and you present that look to the defense, they begin expecting a certain thing, and that's when you kind of clamp down and pull something out of the bag. Like, for instance, they can get to their dagger concept, like 3 routes down the field and a deep dig route to George Kittle that can be a massive chunk play out of the same look that they've just run their standard bread and butter outside zone running with. And those are the things that I hope that Brian Callahan kind of picks up on. There's a part of me that feels like, did Brian Callahan just discover the Bobby Peters books on Amazon? Like, he really is just one of us, like on Amazon, scoping out the literature on it. And I just hope he's paying attention, because those are good books.
I mean, he's nerding out. I love it. I love that he's nerding out. I want to talk about
before we move on, because I think that's a great point that Stoney just brought up. I think the best offenses are not truly complex. They are simple offenses that are made to be complex from the outside looking in, because of formations, because of motion, because of personnel packages, things like that. But they are simple offenses. They are concepts that all the players know how to execute, run really well, but they're the same concepts out of different looks. And so they're simple for the offense and complex for the defense. And I think that's an important distinction when you're talking about like the design, how you want a offense to be designed.
I'm still not sure that this Titans offense.
Stoney and I are really like loving this offensive design conversation. You're just trying to move us on.
I'm trying to get to Will Levis.
One quick thought. I'm not sure that this Titans offense has a Kyle Juszczyk, and you don't realize how important Kyle Juszczyk is to that 49ers offense unless you're actually studying the tape and watching the play diagram, stuff like that. I also think it helps when you have a guy like Christian McCaffrey that can go out and run a lot of those choice routes that are so hard to defend and cause conflict in linebackers, edge rushers, whoever's stuck guarding the running back. But I do think that Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard both are capable of doing similar things. I don't want to put that idea in people's head that, we've got 2 Christian McCaffreys, but I think an added element of those offenses are those choice routes. And I think if Brian Callahan did want to just sprinkle a little bit of that into the offense, he's got 2 backs that are capable of executing.
Okay, well, we're going to switch gears. Now, I'm not going to talk about Will Levis because I'm going to build on top of that. And that is that Mike has a take that he's been marinating on, and I'm gonna throw it out there before it's ready to be on the grill. Yesterday, on Tuesday, Tennessee Titans put out a clip of all 3 top wide receivers, and on the 4th video clip is Josh Whyle. And Mike is now convinced that Josh Whyle is tight end 1 and Chig Okonkwo is trash. Stoney, do one of those guys fit the Kyle Juszczyk mold, where it's not necessarily maybe his blocking or whatever, but he can run those routes like Kyle Juszczyk?
Man, I think if you could put the skill set, the strengths of Josh Whyle and the strengths of Chig Okonkwo into one body, you could get pretty close to it. But no, I don't. Like I said, I don't think either of those guys are proven capable commodities in that regard. Kyle Juszczyk does a lot of things. I mean, he can block your ass off, but he can also take a wheel route 15 yards up the field and make a hands catch at the boundary for you too. So he's a really talented guy that I don't know. I mean, I'm high on both Chig and Josh Whyle, And if you put a gun to my head, I would say Wiley probably fits that mold a little bit better, but I don't think either of them, as far as the role in that particular role in an offense, I don't think either of those guys are going to be your option.
Mike, I kind of am going to add on to your Josh Wiley comments. And the reason why I'm going to add on to it, because I'm thinking, okay, well, he spent time at Cincinnati. Brian Callahan has, obviously, right? Where did he go to school? Where did Josh Wiley go to school? Cincinnati. Could there be a lot of maybe scouting games that maybe Brian Callahan watched a lot more just because he was in the same city of Josh Wiley? And maybe there's some Cincinnati skyline bias going into this season, and that Josh Wiley is the presumed number one tight end, and Chig Okonkwo is just the specialty tight end.
That's kind of where I'm going with my theory here, is that I think you could see, and it's not that I think Chig is trash. I like Chig, and I think he showed up down the stretch last year and actually played pretty well late in the season after a pretty bad start to the year. But I think Wiley gives them a little something different. I think Chig does too, but I could see Wiley ending up out-snapping Chig over the course of the season. Now, I'm not necessarily going to say he's going to outproduce him from a catch and yard standpoint, but just getting more snaps, because I think they've added some weight to him. I think he does some things as far as like being able to stretch the seams vertically, because that is really what he does best. He is a really good seam stretching vertical, route runner out of the tight end position in tight. And I think that gives you some things as an offense. And Will Levis throws that seam ball really well too, by the way. So I think that kind of skill set fits Will Levis's eye to some degree better than what Chig brings to the table. Now, Chig, they still need to use Chig, and he's an important piece because they don't have great run after catch guys at the wide receiver position right now. And Chig is your best run after catch pass catcher besides your running backs. So they need to use him and make him a part of the offense. I just don't. I wouldn't be surprised if Wiley ends up out snapping him, and he's more your traditional Y type tight end. Because if you're going to go 11 personnel, 3 wide all the time, you're probably going to want the bigger body in there rather than the smaller 240-pound move tight end with 3 wide receivers, especially if you're trying to run the ball out of those looks. So the take I am marinating on, and it was still marinating. It wasn't quite ready to go on the grill, as you said, but I guess it's out there now, so we'll cook.
Out there now.
So I think the take I'm marinating, or that I'm now cooking, is Josh Wiley's going to outsnap Chig this year.
To be fair, I've been marinating on it as well, and so I was like, "Well, he said it, so I'm just, well, let's talk about it," because I'm kind of with you. I've been thinking about the same thing. Is like, I feel like Nick Vannett is a good red zone guy to have, and I kind of feel like, yes, he does fill the Jeff Swaim role, but I'm not entirely convinced that the Tennessee Titans are going to use a lot of the Jeff Swaim role. I think they're going to use a guy that could do both. And again, much like what we were talking about with the plays being ran out of the same looks, Josh Wiley provides you a little bit more disguise ability, like a little bit more cloak ability. And I do think that he has that. He kind of reminds me of like when you back in the day when it's not Antonio Gates like, but like when all the tight ends played basketball, right? Like it's everything growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s when you're playing fantasy football and watching all these games. It's like so and so played basketball, and Josh Wiley kind of has that build where you're just kind of like, that dude probably played basketball. Like that dude is a handful at the YMCA under the rim, and he can catch any kind of alley oop. And I kind of felt that way about him going in, that he was a guy that could do both, that he could block and he could be a pass catching tight end. And now we're in year 2 and he's with a real tight ends coach. And no offense to oh shit, I can't remember his who switched from running
Tony
back
Deuce.
to
Tony Deuce.
Yeah, Tony Deuce. I wanted to call him Tony Dorsett, and I was like, that is not Tony Dorsett. But no offense to Tony Deuce. I mean, I understand why he had the position switch, but Justin Otten is a proven tight ends coach from Green Bay, and like Josh Wiley kind of reminds me of Robert Tonyan, right? And Robert Tonyan kind of exploded on the scenes here and there. I think I think Jared Cook may have been there for a little bit with Justin Naughton, but I'm not for sure. But it's kind of like, yeah, poor man's Jimmy Graham. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Poor man's Jimmy Graham, Glory Day Sports. So, and I like the Wiley pick. I wasn't ready to give up on Wiley. I'm not really ready to give up on Chig either, but I do think that Wiley is probably. We talk about not being a carbon copy paste, of the Cincinnati Bengals, but I do feel like even going back like to the Peyton Manning to Matt Stafford era, Brian Callahan years, I kind of look at it and I go, yeah, I think Josh Wiley's the guy. I don't think if Matt Stafford and Peyton Manning were on the team, I feel like Josh Wiley's the guy. Like, I just kind of feel like that's the guy that they'd be throwing to. Maybe that says more about Peyton Manning and Matt Stafford, but hey, I don't know.
If I may, before we move
you may.
on,
I can't stop you from
okay.
May.
I still haven't gotten my hands on any of the Temple offense all 22. For whatever reason, that Temple all 22 and the Pittsburgh all 22 is just impossible to find this draft cycle. But say Mike's boy, the tight end out of Temple, from what I saw the clips at OTAs yesterday, looks like a pretty athletic guy. Looks like he moves pretty well out there.
Yeah, he moves well. David Martin Robinson, DMR, baby.
DMR.
Too many names. He'll never amount to anything. Okay. Let's talk about Will Levis. And I want to talk about from this perspective, because there's a lot to like about Will Levis, but a lot of stuff that we've kind of already covered here and there and that you can hear everywhere else. But the Music City Audible released a clip yesterday, which I thought was a good jumping off point. And first off, they said, Just Graver said that he's Patrick Mahomes. Will Levis is Patrick Mahomes. It says it right there in the tweet. So I'm not gonna tell you what the context of it actually was, because they didn't put it in the tweet, so you don't deserve the context. So that's what Justin Graver said. Will Levis is Patrick Mahomes. But he talked about like that he's convinced, or that he believes, that the Tennessee Titans already believe that Will Levis is the guy. I believe that they really like what Will Levis is, but they don't know if he's the guy, and they are building like he is. They are building the offense and the team like he's a plug-and-play quarterback. You take any quarterback from the future, you're going to plug him into this system and this team. Granted, they're going to build stuff around his strengths and stuff, but I don't know if they're convinced that Will Levis is the guy, but I do believe that they have seen enough that Will Levis is the guy for 2024. Like, he's not the guy, but he's the guy right now. And so we're going to build around our quarterback, regardless of who it would have been. I think they would have built around their quarterback. And then next year, if he fails, then next year you're set up in a good situation for the next quarterback. That's where I come from. And I do not believe that Will Levis is anything like Patrick Mahomes or is remotely as talented as Patrick Mahomes, like Justin Graver said in that tweet.
I would say I'm on the same thought process as you, Zach. I think they're cautiously optimistic about Levis. I don't think that they're necessarily sold. Now, I will say this. I think Brian Callahan might be pretty sold. The way he talks about Levis is always glowing, right? Like he really seems to like him genuinely. And he comes across pretty genuine in most of these interviews. Like, I don't know that he's blowing a ton of smoke. Obviously, he's not going to come out and say anything bad about Levis, but he doesn't have to be as over the top glowing as he is at times. And frankly, he said now multiple times that Will Levis is part of why he took the job. And obviously, don't forget that, he was scheduled to go to the Panthers the next day when he ended up getting hired here. Now, I think part of why he ended up here was Rand Carthon and the connection. He's talked about that as well, like it feeling like home to him and feeling that connection with Carthon. But I also think he does like Will Levis. I don't think he'd be here if he thought Will Levis was terrible. I don't think he'd be here because I think he knows he's going to be judged on what he's able to get out of Will Levis. So, and it's not the quarterback he drafted. Everybody knows that, but he's still going to be judged on what he gets out of Will Levis and whether he improves from year to year. And I think if he didn't think he could get something out of him, he wouldn't be here. So I think Callahan is probably pretty sold on Will Levis, and I'm intrigued to see how that manifests itself.
Stoney?
I think Callahan's sold on him. I'm sold on him. This was something that Mike and I talked about last week a little bit. I think it's because He has talent that you can't quite coach, you can't quite put into somebody. He has the intangibles you can't quite coach either. And that was something that I think I missed the most on in my draft evaluation of him, was thinking that he was some goofy, awkward guy that didn't have leadership characteristics. But you saw those things manifest in him in his rookie season when he was thrust into action. And my favorite Big Jeff quote of 2023, that damn Will Levis can play. Man, the teammates seeing that and kind of rallying around him, and Brian Callahan specifically mentioned stuff like that in the interview with The Athletic, which, by the way, we got to talk about Brian Callahan putting those legs out there in every interview that he does. Some thick, muscly legs. Guy looks like he could go out there and block, but I digress. I think to see those things in your quarterback, and to basically say what we've got to work on with him is teaching him to not take the chunk play or go for the kill shot on every play, but to get the completion percentage up by taking the dump offs, taking the mid-range stuff like that. I don't know. Like, for me, at the end of the 2023 season, I was kind of sold that because of those things, those intangibles, that Will Levis is the guy that you build around. And I kind of feel like Brian Callahan sees it that way as well. But to your point, Zach, I don't know why it can't be a little bit of both. Like, you've got the resources. Why not put all of these pieces and just stockpile talent around Will Levis? And that way you've got a good support system in place, whether he's the quarterback of the future or you do a complete 180 and decide to go with someone else next season or the season after that. I think there is a way to do both when you have the cap space that the Titans have, and you bring in the sheer volume of free agents that you do.
I want to talk about the Penei Sewell versus Jamar Chase kind of segment and comments made on Busted with the Boys, because I thought it was interesting. And maybe I'm the only one picked up on it, and maybe I'm a little overthinking it. But obviously here you had the wide receiver versus offensive line discussion here. You had Bill Callahan going on record saying, if all things are equal, not just the players, but circumstances and stuff, then I'm going to go with the guy that scores touchdowns. But he said something that made me stress that all things are equal. And one of the big things that he kind of like hammered the table on and used as evidence for Jamar Chase was the fact that Peyton Manning and Joe Burrow had are similar in how quick they get the ball out. So it doesn't matter what's going on around them. They make quick decisions, get the ball out. And so that's why you go wide receiver. Because even in Indy, Peyton Manning always had terrible offensive lines, but he had Reggie Wayne, T.Y. Hilton towards the end of his career, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brandon Stokely, Dallas Clark. It didn't matter about the offensive line, but he was able to get the ball out quickly. One of the big complaints that we've all had about Will Levis last year is that he does not get the ball out as quickly as he should. It's not that he's super slow or anything. It's just that he needs to get the ball out quicker. And I ask you, Stoney, I'll start with you. Do you think that because he gets the ball out a little bit slower than Peyton Manning and Joe Burrow, that is why they really went, they were going to go offensive line over, I want to say now, almost any of the wide receivers outside of Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, I think it could absolutely be a part of the equation. I kind of felt like, so his comments on the Athletic show about that, I thought were particularly interesting as well, because he said there are other ways that you can acquire wide receiver talent, but if you want a stud tackle, historically speaking, there's only been like one traditional route to get the guy, and it's with that high first round pick. And so it kind of enlightens you a little bit when you step back and say, okay, so they felt like they needed to get one of those guys, partly because I think it helps streamline the process for Levis, because it's one less thing that he has to worry about. And I can't speak to whether the goal was to get him to release the ball quicker, but I think it could be, I don't know, you might be onto something there, that by speeding up his process, simplifying it, making it so that he doesn't have to worry about what's coming at his left side, can help that process. Maybe you improve upon those metrics, and just by adding JC Latham and Lloyd Cushenberry, for that matter, you are improving his processing speed a little bit.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, part of that conversation honestly made me think back, because I keep coming back to this idea. They've talked about it a lot this offseason, that Calvin Ridley was not necessarily plan A going into the offseason. They had another plan, and it got blown up, and they pivoted to Ridley. And frankly, I kind of think it's probably a good thing that they pivoted, because I'm guessing I probably would not have liked plan A as much as I liked plan B, as it turned out. But I've been curious as to what that plan A was. And I know everybody assumes it was re-signing Danico Autry and Azeez Al-Shire. Now, I have zero doubt that may have been part of it, but I don't think that was the whole thing. I almost wonder if part of plan A wasn't they were going to sign some tackle. And I'm not, I'm not saying Jonah Williams is great, but I wonder if maybe they wanted Jonah Williams, and then they, we're going to grab him, plug him in at a tackle spot, and then draft a wide receiver at number 7. And when that, when Williams went to Arizona, I can't remember if Williams went to Arizona before Ridley came here, though.
I'm about to find out.
Yeah, look that up, and it doesn't have to be Williams. It could have been some other tackle, although I think the tackle market was kind of late anyways, generally. But this is clearly a theory I'm workshopping here live. But I wonder if there's not something that, like, they looked at the best combination of, like, we have to get a wide receiver, we have to get a tackle. What's the best combination that we can get? And you get a better option in the tackle class with the draft, clearly, than the free agent class.
Well, they both signed on March 13th, but I think Jonah Williams signed before Calvin Ridley when we were live. But I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, we'd have to go look at the timing on that. But it does make me kind of think, hey, maybe that was what plan A was. It had something to do with signing Jonah Williams, then drafting, Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. Also thought it was kind of interesting, and we kind of knew this already, but they clearly had Latham and Alt kind of separated from the rest of the tackle group. He's mentioned that consistently. And I feel
they
like
were 1A, 1B. I mean, he said we would have been ecstatic with either of them. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's an interesting point that, that gives us a lot of insight as far as, like, how they evaluated this group. It's his media appearances have been really good and interesting. And I appreciate how transparent he is with some of this stuff.
Well, let's end the show talking about some OTA topics that also kind of tie into what he talked about. Specifically, he was asked about Treylon Burks on Busted with the Boys, and it's just another video or audio clip of him being very excited about Treylon Burks. It's kind of like when you asked Mike Vrabel about Dr. Jack Gibby and how he lit up with excitement. He always had those random players he just lit up with excitement on. And it really feels like they feel like they got something in Tyler Boyd and have the luxury, they feel like they have because of the signing of Tyler Boyd and the signing of Calvin Ridley, that they have the luxury of truly developing Treylon Burks into something that they can use. It may not look like the Treylon Burks of the past as far as how he's deployed and all this stuff and what he's asked to do, but it seems like he's really giddy about it. And it seems like, I don't think it's just coach speak, because you can just say stuff, but the way that he says it, the way that he expresses emotions, his eyes kind of light up, and he's like really excited about what he's done in the offseason leading into here. And that's the thing, because I saw that Deagle said something about, like, well, this is a Stillman take, but this is because this is what's said on Stillman yesterday. I know this is where it's coming from. I was like, oh, but he's saying really nice things about MPF and Burks, so maybe he just says nice things about everybody. And listen, coaches pretty much say nice things about every player, but it's how they say it, and it's the context of whether they're saying they're good or not. Like in NPF, he was like, hey, I'm really happy about his he's done really well, and he's making great progress as far as his rehab goes. But he even said in that same sentence, in that same clip that Jared says, and of course ignores this part of the clip, but we got to see it on the field. You know, we got to put it on the field in practice, but he's done really good at rehab. Traylon Burks, we know he looks good on the field in most situations, especially in practice. But it really feels like the work he's put in the offseason has gone a long way with his coaching staff. And I still do not get the sense that Traylon Burks is getting traded. And that I really do think that this past regime did not like Traylon Burks. And I'm writing up a whole story about a bunch of wide receivers that flamed out their first 2 years of varying picks. And they really cranked it up because circumstances around them changed. It'll be a little bit different for Traylon Burks, but I kind of got that part covered because he's going to be essentially outside wide receiver, 3. He's not going to be a prominent feature of the offense, but you look at his yards per reception, his yards per route run, and compare him to some other wide receivers who were bad and got really good after the third year when circumstances changed for them. It's not out of the realm possibility that you're talking about a guy that can contribute, not a 1,000-yard receiver, but you're talking about a guy that is going to play behind Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe get you 5 or 6 touchdowns, and maybe get you 500 or 600 yards receiving because this team's going to pass a lot. And I was watching the Bussin interview yesterday, and I looked at Texas Stoney, and I go, this dude just loves fucking Traylon Burks. And Stoney, you were a little behind than I was, but I'm telling you, I think he loves Traylon Burks.
Well,
and I think he loves the idea that he has there's no pressure to develop Traylon Burks because of what they put above him. So I think he likes the strategy and the chances of developing Traylon Burks into what everybody thought he was, which was a first-round wide receiver.
Yeah, so I'm going to say something that might get Justin Graver off the hook for saying Patrick Mahomes or Will Levis is Patrick Mahomes, but we're workshopping ideas live on air on the show today, right? Okay, I just jotted this down as a potential film study to do at some point this summer, but let's put our tinfoil hats on for a second here. Things that we've talked about in this show. Brian Callahan loves Traylon Burks, lights up every time that he talks about him. You have DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, all have very specific skill sets that fit a certain role within the offense. We also talked about Brian Callahan going out there and studying Kyle Shanahan's system. I'm wondering if Brian Callahan is illuminating every time Traylon Burks is brought up because he sees a player that he might be able to use similarly to how Kyle Shanahan uses Deebo Samuel in the backfield, in motion, blocking, as a bit of a decoy, capitalizing on the toughness and the athleticism. Burks's big frame probably looks at him as a piece that he can move around and do a lot of different things. And you and I have talked about it privately, Zach. We might have talked about it on the air. I don't remember, but the key cogs in that offense are Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. The whole thing flows out of. And Deebo Samuel feels like a bit of a luxury in that offense. So it just kind of makes me wonder if I'm looking at all these pieces separately, connecting them together, if Brian Callahan recognizes the raw talent, the athleticism that Burks still possesses, and he's watching other offenses, and he's like, I've got a guy that I can use in similar fashion, where the expectations aren't for him to go out there and make the big play downfield, but can really contribute to this offense. Now, again, I'm not saying that Traylon Burks is Deebo Samuel. I'm just floating the idea out there that maybe Brian Callahan looks at him similarly in terms of usage and deployment.
Yeah, I think I'm excited about the fact that Burks is kind of cut loose from expectations at this point. Because look, I mean, say what you want about Burks, but the nice thing, it's a nice thing to be able to have a guy that is not required to be a starter, not required to be a main piece of the offense, that has that kind of talent that you can sprinkle in to some gadget plays here and there, that you can sprinkle in for some deep shots here and there, that you can use as seasoning on the offense rather than him being like the steak of the offense, right? Like, so I think Burks, and that's kind of how I view the whole Chig
A lot
thing
of grill
too. Like,
comparisons on on this show today.
oh yeah, and I was about to tie
Memorial Day
in
weekend.
our Wiley steak that we threw on the grill earlier.
Yeah.
It looked like having Wiley as your kind of main guy, and then being able to sprinkle in Chig because he's another kind of gadget type guy that you can use. Like, that's exciting because those are guys that don't have to be starters. You can just use them for certain things. And I think that gives you some exciting depth for once at these positions. But I also think that Callahan's motives with the way he talks about Burks could be to build him up. Because I the way I saw Burks last year and just like body language, how he talked, stuff like that, like during the offseason was great. Like he was positive, he seemed fired up, all that stuff. But then when he had the setback in camp and then later in the season, he was obviously struggling, not having a good year. That guy just seemed like somebody who needed a pick me up. And I think maybe the previous coaching staff really did not like him, and he knew that. And that wears on a guy. You come to work every day and you feel like you're not liked. You feel like you're being shit on constantly. That'll catch up to you eventually. And part of me wonders if like Brian Callahan isn't looking at him and going, look, this guy needs to be picked up. I need to build up this guy, build up his confidence, because when he was confident, when he was at Arkansas, we saw what he did. We all saw what he did. Like, you can't convince me that this guy doesn't have the physical talent to be a weapon in the NFL. Like, not maybe a wide receiver one, but to be a weapon that is a positive influence on the team. You can't convince me he doesn't have the talent to do that. So it's about getting him between the ears right, physically right, and then getting him on the field and using him. So I think that's what they're doing. I think they're building him up. I think they do want to use him. I think he will be a part of the offense, but he's going to be seasoning. And I think that's exactly what he needs to be right now. And look, he's got a great room of wide receivers to learn from and talk to. And it sounds like, I think Kayla Anderson, and I apologize if I'm attributing this, but Kayla Anderson had yesterday that, she saw Burks out there spending a lot of time with Calvin Ridley, talking to him between drills and stuff like that, which is great. I hope he's out there soaking up all that knowledge.
Traylon Burks were training together, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
There was like at the owners meeting, he said something to PK or TD. I can't remember which one, maybe Jim White. I don't know. One of those guys that was down there at the owners meetings. And he was talking about, he mentioned just kind of offhand that he had been training with Traylon Burks, or DeAndre Hopkins was saying that Traylon Burks was training with him. Let's get into, because we only got a few minutes left, so let's get into the injuries from OTAs. Obviously, hype train on Jaquan Jackson's already out of control. Dylan Radins and Peter Skoronski have both put on weight, and they're all pro awards and voting a weight for them. But Tavondre Sweat was there out in day 2 at some point, and then goes back inside. We know that L'Jarius Sneed was not out there at OTAs, which is kind of like no surprise if you followed what he did at Kansas City. NPF is still working through his rehab from his surgery last season. And he was out there at mandatory OTAs, voluntary veteran minicamp at one point. And Jeffrey Simmons was not out there, and Harold Landry wasn't out there. I feel like I saw one tweet that said that he was, and one tweet that says he wasn't. I don't know. Are you concerned at all by any of these this year, this early? Because it kind of feels like Brian Callahan didn't really want to talk about injuries, and we may, out of all the things that he's been transparent about, kind of getting the sense that, okay, injuries may be one we're not going to be very transparent about. And unless he's forced to by the injury report, which kind of you allude to. But of course, I don't know, do we want to call the sweat detractors in the fan base, the media? Do we want to call them the 2 down crew, like 2 live crew, or the 2 down boys with a Z, like the 69 boys? Like, which one do we want to call it?
What about the fat shamers? Can we just call them the fat shamers?
No, it's not. Yeah. We've already done the fat shaming and stuff. We got to be new. So we think a 2 down crew or 2 down boys with
2 down boys. It's more demeaning.
Okay. Yeah, I like 2 down boys.
I like to be more demeaning anyway. So the 2 down boys contingent of the fan base and the media, of course, harped all over that, Tavondre Sweat was not there. And rehabbing something. Likely a hamstring, right? Like, I mean, it's more than likely what it is. Of course, none of them are mentioning that Jarvis Brown-Lee has not been at a practice for a while. He left rookie minicamp and has not been at a practice, but they don't care about that. So are you guys concerned? I mean, because we don't have enough information to be concerned, but people are already victory lapping after one practice in May that T'Vondre Sweat's career is over and L'Jarius Sneed was, in fact, an overpay, and they should have never listened to their medical doctors about L'Jarius Sneed's knees, even though that L'Jarius Sneed participated, I think we counted in like 10 practices all year last year. I don't even know if it was that many as far as off-season practices. So any concern with any of these yet, Mike?
Not for me. I like, look, if the idea was that T'Vondre Sweat was never going to miss a practice in his entire career, like, I mean, where are we setting expectations here? And besides, like, it looked like he was out there at some point, and it could have just been part of like some little issue. He could have turned an ankle. Like, you know, we just don't know what any of this stuff is. So there's no point in overreacting. To me, Sneed is almost more concerning, but because of like the fact that it is, you know, clear that he's just not going to be able to do a full practice workload. Now, he didn't need to be super successful, and I don't think he'll need to be successful here either. But it is just something that, like, I think it's just going to be something you keep an eye on pretty consistently. And, you know, we'll see kind of how things go. But I'm not – it's way too early. Like, these are voluntary OTAs. They're not doing anything that crazy. They aren't even doing like full teamwork yet. I think 7-on-7 is as far as they can go right now.
Yeah.
So it's not, they're not missing anything huge. This is all just, you know, learning how to practice still at this point.
Stoney, you got like 2 minutes. Go.
Well, my Hard Out at 2:30 actually got canceled today, so we're
okay.
good.
Well, then there we go. Let's just let's make this a 2-hour podcast, baby.
Let's go.
I am not concerned about any of the veterans missing OTAs, and Paul Kaharski reported yesterday that the issue with Sweat is, quote, minor and precautionary. So I'm not worried about that either. The only one I'll say that kind of caught me by surprise, and I'll admit that maybe I just don't have the latest info on this player, but I'm kind of curious as to why Jalen Duncan wasn't out there.
I knew you were going to be worried about
strikes me as the type of guy that needs all the practice reps that he can get. I figured he would be in the mix for either the right guard or the right tackle spot on the right side of the line. Those competitions with the installation going on. Every set of eyeballs on you that you can get means something if you're a player at the spot that Jalen Duncan is at. And I just don't know. I didn't see why he wasn't there, if he was dealing with an injury or what.
Well, let's talk about that right tackle position, because PK has said that he can't, in his OTA stuff, he can't tell us which offensive linemen were practicing on the right side. And I'm curious to know if that's just a Vrabel, like a hangover from a Vrabel rule, or if that's Brian Callahan's rule as well. But he did say, he alluded to like nobody that's basically that we have all penciled in at guard in that guard battle was over in that spot, in the right tackle spot.
Which is code for it's not Dylan Radins over there.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say, which means that all-powerful, all-pro Dylan Radins, who murdered on the field Nick Bosa, on the field, because, I mean, that's obviously why he got no pressures and no sacks allowed on him. But I want to ask, we got to think it's John Ojukwu and Leroy Watson. I would assume.
Watson. I'd bet almost anything it was Leroy Watson with the ones at right tackle. And he has experience with Bill Callahan. They traded a pick for him, so I think they clearly see something in him, even if it was a 7th rounder. So I would bet almost anything it's Leroy Watson. What I would love to know is who's working with the ones at right guard. I would assume Brunskill, just out of seniority and all that, but I think that may be the battle that I'm like most intrigued by right now.
I mean, I'm a Brunskill guy, but I do think Dylan Radins, if he can't beat out Daniel Brunskill, I think that says more about Dylan Radins than it does about Daniel Brunskill.
For sure.
But I do think that he should beat out Daniel Brunskill. I mean, I think Radens will be your starting right guard.
And I think it
wouldn't
would be
really put
exciting.
away Sadiq Charles could be a guy. And, Sadiq Charles does have right tackle, I think, experience in the NFL. So he may be a guy that's on that group. But
He played
I
left
agree with you.
tackle at
I think it's
LSU.
I think it's Leroy Watson was the first team right tackle, and then John Ojukwu was probably like the second guy.
Yeah, that would be my guess as well. And I think it would be exciting for me. I think the best case scenario is either Radens or Charles, because I think those guys are kind of interchangeable at this point. They're both the same age. Charles and Radens are both on expiring contracts. So, like, to me, those are kind of the same guy there. But it would be pretty exciting if one of those guys won right guard, Nicholas Petit-Frere got healthy and was able to win right tackle. Because then you're looking at an offensive line where the oldest guy is Lloyd Cushenberry at 26 years old. And you've got a group of 5 where if you decided to bring back Radens, you could have a core group together for a little while and pretty cheap. Because, I mean, even if Radens plays pretty well at right guard, I don't think he's going to break the bank as a free agent next year. So you could have a nice core group that you could keep together for a little while and really go on a run here on the offensive line if those guys can stick. Now, I don't know if they can or not, but that's what I'm rooting for from a Titans fan standpoint is give me Radens or Charles at right guard and give me Petit-Frere at right tackle and hopefully they're decent, or at least or good maybe, but decent would be nice.
You're just rooting for average on that right side.
Yes.
I mean, you cannot have and that's something that's why Bill Callahan's here, is to make at least that every offensive line spot average. Whether now they go from average to great, elite, all pro, that's a totally different conversation to have. But as long as every position is average, you're 1,000 times better as an offense than what you were last year, because not only that in a vacuum is magnificent, but you have the 3 wide receivers that you have. So let's do an early prediction here for you, Stoney. Where are you at on the right guard, right tackle battle? Do you think it's going to be Radens and NPF, or are you going dark horse?
No, I do think it's going to be Radens and NPF, with the further caveat being I think Brunskill might be better suited for a move to be the backup center or kind of a swing guy, a depth guy. I just think they want bigger bodies in there, and Brunskill doesn't offer that. I think if Radens completed his sleeve tattoo, he did some tricep extensions. What more can you ask for the guy? He clearly is the most powerful option at right guard. And I think you talk about gleaning things from hearing the coaches talk about Treylon Burks. I kind of feel like Nicholas Petit-Frere is that guy along the offensive line where every time his name is brought up, there is this sort of like quiet confidence, like, yeah, there's going to be a competition there and we're good with it. And looking at the options, I mean, Nicholas Petit-Frere is the one guy that probably has actually played some quality right tackle at a certain point in his career. So if you're the optimist here, you're holding on to that little nugget and you're saying that's the guy. And I think that probably would be the ideal situation for me, with Leroy Watson serving as a backup. I think if there is a dark horse, I'm glad you said Sadiq Charles as a potential option at right tackle, because I was going to say the same thing, but I don't know, until we can figure out what's going on with Jalen Duncan. I'm not ready to say there is a dark horse among the bunch. I think it's going to be Radens and NPF.
We have crapped on this edge group a lot. And I want to give some credit. And listen, this is just the underwear Olympics portion of training camp, just guys in shorts looking good. But Rashad Weaver has put in some work this offseason. I don't know if y'all have seen.
Yeah.
Have you all seen the clips from Rashad Weaver last night?
Oh, no.
That dude. Apparently, all I do is bitch and moan every episode with Colton Smith, which I have not bitched and moaned at all this episode. So, pretty interesting. But either way, I thought that Rashad Weaver has looked really good. Now, again, but he looked fast, but he physically looked like he went through, like you talk about transformations. That guy went through a physical transformation I think is so far looks to be the best out of like, the Skoronskis guys, the Radens, the guys that have noticeably gotten bigger. He's noticeably trimmed down. I mean, he looks like a totally different player out there. Not ready to like say anything about Rashad Weaver other than I'll have to say that dude looks like he came knowing that this is a year. Like this is a year I have to show out and prove that I am something. And maybe he was told something, but my God, what a body transformation.
What was he doing out last night? Was he out at the club with his shirt off? What did I miss?
No. It was a drill. Someone posted up a drill, but
at the OTAs, they just didn't post it
it
until
just got
last
posted
night.
up.
Okay,
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, I saw a couple of clips that someone shared, and I kind of thought the same thing. Like, wow, he looks a lot more trim than I remembered. Because you and I, Zach, have talked about him kind of being an option to fill in maybe for that Danico Autry kind of hybrid defensive end, defensive line role. That didn't look like a guy that had the stockiness required to fill that role. That guy looked like a pass rusher.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, he does look trimmed down. He looks, far more defined from a musculature standpoint, and looked like he was moving better too. I mean, it's drills against air and pads and stuff, but just looked like he was a little bit more spry than what we've seen of him in the last few years. So interesting. It's interesting that they're showing that kind of faith in Weaver because right now, I mean, even if you say Arden Key's going to end up being your starter, which, I'm not totally comfortable with, Weaver being your third guy and a guy that's going to play a lot is a pretty big leap of faith in him. So it's intriguing to me that they've made that leap of faith and he's coming out there looking like a different guy in a contract year. I mean, it's something to keep an eye on anyways.
It's just very, I mean, I'm looking at the clip from Jim Wyatt. He posted it up and I'm just like, I could not believe that was Rashad Weaver. Like I missed that clip till late last night. I'm like, dude, that guy looks totally different. So got to commend him. That'll do it for us. Ending on a positive note, since all I do is bitch and moan according to Colton. Bluegrass Beverages are our sponsors. Hendersonville, Tennessee. Over 50 years of serving the Middle Tennessee area. Is Hendersonville considered Middle Tennessee? Probably. I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So Middle Tennessee right there. And they're awesome. They have a fantastic staff. You go in and you can ask anybody in the staff for a good recommendation. They're going to give you a good recommendation. They have all the party essentials that you need and all that kind of stuff. Other than that, for Stoney Keeley, you can read all of his stuff at the Sobros Network and over at stackinginbox.com. You can read all my stuff over at stackinginbox.com. And, of course, Mike wrote his top 5 most important Titans players for the 2024 season over at paulkaharski.com. You can follow all this next, Mike Herndon NFL, at Stoney Keeley, and at Efforts Pop. But this has been Football and Other Efforts, and you have just been effed.